You know that dinosaur game that you can play on Google Chrome when you're not connected to the internet? It's called T-Rex Runner. I'm sure that most of us are at least familiar with it. And you can still play it while being online too, just by googling T-Rex Runner. Anyhow, while some of you may be familiar with the game itself, did you know that there are more mechanics in the game than you might have thought? Some might just jump over the obstacles, but you're actually given the ability to duck as well, which is helpful for this specific bird which flies at mid-level. Or is it a pterodactyl? Also, you can short hop by very briefly tapping the jump button. Or you can hold down when you're at the peak of a normal jump to fall faster. Nothing too crazy, just some things I didn't know about the game till a while ago. Here's the high score I got when playing around with the game to test it. You should tell me yours too. Anyhow, to hop back into Smash, we went over a handful of Wario facts in my last video, and as usual, I want to add to that a bit before moving on to new stuff. First, Nuke Incoming asks if you're able to use Wario's bike taunt online. In our last video, we saw that the WarioWare taunt minigame didn't count Wario's bike taunt as an official taunt, thus not allowing him to win the minigame. And as we know, on quick play you can't taunt at all. So with Wario's bike taunt not being a quote-unquote real taunt, can you use it online? And the answer is no. Despite my initial thought, taunting on the bike is also not an option on quick play. And you know, it makes sense for the same reason that it doesn't make sense that this bike taunt doesn't net you a win in the WarioWare minigame. It's, you know, a taunt. So I find it interesting that this online anti-taunt system restricts the bike taunt, but the WarioWare minigame doesn't put it in the taunt category. Next, quite a few people were telling me this in the comments of my last video, but the size of Wario's stomach will change based on how much waft he has charged. Notice how the Wario in the front has a bit of his belly's skin showing, while the Wario behind, with no waft, has his shirt fully covering his stomach. It's slightly more noticeable at full charge. However, with his classic alt variation, since he's wearing overalls, you can't exactly see anything like this. And when I compared the no waft Wario to the full waft Wario here, I didn't actually notice any visual difference between the two. So with this alt, you can only rely on the subtle glow effect to tell you when you have full waft. Which is way more practical anyways, but who cares. This is a detail that I totally missed in the heat of battle, though, so I thought it would be really cool to point out. Alright, so that's it for catch up. Also a fun fact, but did you know that this is this channel's 69th video? Very nice, please laugh. But better yet, this is the 20th installment of the main Random Smash Facts series. I say main because there was a baby one I made very early on in the channel, but I'm not going to count it. I just wanted to take a very small moment to thank you all for the continued support of this series, with all your many facts and questions and discussions. Even if 75% of the people who watch this are not subscribed, I still appreciate you all coming by to catch the facts. So to celebrate, why not tell me your favorite fact that you've seen on this channel, down in the comments below. I'd love to see which facts have stuck with y'all the most. But enough about past facts, since we've got some fun facts in this video too. For example, this fact by Luker Griffin, regarding the Beetle item and metal opponents. So here's what happens when Pichu normally gets grabbed by a Beetle. But if Pichu picks up a metal box and then gets grabbed by the Beetle, I don't think I even have to do a side-by-side comparison to show that Pichu takes way longer to get KO'd off the top here. It's like the Beetle is struggling to fly because it's lifting something heavier. I want to show just how big the difference is with the test, but just a note, for this test, I need to incorporate mashing, since the Beetle will almost always be successful in KOing you if you don't mash, no matter what. We'll get into that in a bit. Without metal, and with somewhat consistent mashing, the Beetle won't KO Pichu until about 50%. However, when Pichu is metal, it didn't start KOing until about 210%. That is a massive difference, even if the ceiling here is quite big. So this got me wondering, the logic behind the Beetle's struggle seems to be weight dependent, right? So I was thinking, does Beetle take longer on opponents whose natural weights are higher? So let's just do a side-by-side comparison between the speed of Pichu's ascent and the speed of Bowser's ascent. And as we see here, Bowser took quite a bit longer to get to the top than Pichu did. For some harder numbers, while Pichu stopped being able to mash at about 50%, Bowser could mash out of the Beetle up until 105%, an absolutely massive leap. And instead of doing this type of test with Metal Bowser, I want to give another interesting fact that really accentuates this difference. See, with no mashing, despite being metal, the Beetle will still be able to lift Pichu into the top blast zone eventually. But when Bowser is metal, it goes up so slowly that here in training mode, the Beetle itself just breaks. Note that this animation of the Beetle breaking doesn't usually happen. When you typically just mash out a Beetle, you just escape. It keeps ascending even after that. Never does the Beetle outright break like this unless you're testing it in this environment. So yeah, in conclusion, the speed in which the Beetle brings someone up depends entirely on the opponent's weight, be it their natural weight or anything that changes their weight like items or spirits. Oh, and I was curious to see what happened to the Beetle's speed if the opponents lost weight during the process. So I waited until the metal box would run out mid-flight, and it seems that the Beetle will stay the same speed throughout the entire process, its speed depending on the opponent's weight at the start. So nothing special happens here. Oh yeah, speaking of special things, Crypto52 had given me a very interesting little fact regarding the Special Smash menu. If you go into the menu and turn on the flower option and wait a while, you'll see Mario here start to emit the rage effect. What this tells me is that when Mario has the flower on right here, he's actually taking damage, which I find to be incredibly fascinating. It's like it means Mario here is an actual in-game entity, and the flower is interacting with him appropriately. And if we remove the flower, then the rage effect goes away along with it, so it almost resets his state. And while we're on the topic of Special Smash, SammySchool10 asks if the Shadow Moses Island spotlights will spot you if you're invisible. Now the question itself asks this in regards to Hero's Hocus Pocus invisibility, but I'd rather not deal with the RNG, and instead I'm going to be using the clear effect of Special Smash to test this. And going into Shadow Moses, we see that the spotlight is still fully able to spot us, despite being basically invisible. It would have been a really cool feature if this wasn't the case, but I guess you can't win it all. Oh, and since I know some people will definitely ask, yes, the spotlight will even catch Snake while he's in his box taunt. Very unfortunate, but at least we all know now. Speaking of Snake though, Frenzy Light had given me a very nice fact about C4 and how it acts in training mode. Under normal circumstances, if you blow up C4 near you, you yourself will also get blown up. This is, I know, common knowledge. And as we probably also know, a consequence of this is this specific recovery technique, where Snake continues to get his up B back after he blows himself up. And normally this is also the case for the CPU here. However, if we turn on fixed damage, while this doesn't actually affect player 1, it will affect the CPU, so he doesn't take any damage from his own C4. Now, we know he's still being blown up from the C4, he's just not taking any damage. And a certain consequence of this is that, after using up B and blowing himself up, he doesn't get his up B back. No matter how much I tried, I simply couldn't up B again. So even though the C4 is blowing up the CPU here, he's not actually regaining his up B from it. What that seems to imply is that the act of simply being attacked isn't enough to regain the up B, but specifically you need to take knockback and damage for it to become available again. I do specify knockback because things like Fox's lasers don't seem to replenish the up B, which is, just damage, no knockback. Still on Snake C4, in my last video I got two very similar comments by Dark Pit and DiamondsX87, which regards how C4 works when the bridge in Palutena's temple breaks and when the ground changes from a stage morph. Both of these comments got a lot of likes, so I guess I'll just address them. When you place a C4 on the bridge in Palutena's temple and break said bridge, the C4 will just succumb to gravity and fall. It's hard to see it actually fall, but as we can see here, the C4 moved to the tree directly below. And with a stage morph, the C4 simply gets passed on from one surface to the next, safe and sound. Speaking of explosions though, Jaden Costa gave me a really funny fact regarding Jigglypuff's Final Smash and Hero's Kamikaze. It's very small, but you know how when someone uses Kamikaze near someone else, they'll have that face of shock for that slowdown portion? Well, if you use Kamikaze while Jigglypuff is using her Final Smash, she'll still get that shocked expression on her face for a small moment, which I find to be really funny. But this fact did get me thinking about a few other things. First, what happens if you use Kamikaze near a sleeping opponent? And the answer is that their expression doesn't change, for they are still asleep. And what about someone who is dazed, say from a Deku Note? The answer to that is that the shocked expression still appears. And lastly, what about your teammates? Do they still get the shocked expression too? When I spawned in my fellow CPUs, who could not be harmed by the Kamikaze, he still had a shocked expression on his face. So it seems that generally this expression will appear on anyone who witnesses the Kamikaze take place, or something like that. Pretty neat stuff. Moving back to Jigglypuff though, EPM Tunes asks if you can save Jigglypuff from a shield break at high percents. To inform anyone who doesn't know, when you break your shield, in the moments that you pop up, and a little bit after you land, you are intangible, meaning you can't be hit. While it's very hard to tell, this is also the case for when Jigglypuff breaks your shield. Now, the comment in question states that this intangibility goes away at high percents, but this isn't quite true. At high percents, you just stay dazed for a much shorter period of time. However, you do lose that intangibility when there's only 5 seconds remaining on the clock. As we can see here, Toonling gets hit immediately after his shield breaks, which would normally be impossible. This is a pretty niche mechanic of the game, but the question is asking if you can make use of this mechanic to save Jigglypuff after her shield breaks, perhaps with a footstool or something. I decided to use Toonlink's down air, considering how long lasting it is, and after finally getting the timing right, yeah. Toonlink was able to hit Jigglypuff even after her shield had broken, essentially saving her. So under the extremely specific circumstances that there are 5 seconds left on the clock and your teammate Jigglypuff gets their shield broken, you can, indeed, save them. Oh, and one thing I wanted to quickly mention before we moved on to our last topic, but it's a really small fact about spawning in items. But when an explosive item spawns in, there's actually a very small timer before you can actually hit it. This doesn't seem to be the case for things like crates and such, but if you spawn in any typical explosive item and attack it immediately, your attack won't do anything. I'm pretty sure this is just so you don't accidentally hit a randomly spawning explosive and get KO'd for it, which is honestly a little sad because those types of occurrences are really funny, but so it goes. Alright, and for my last fact of this video, RMSR asks if Game & Watch's judge, specifically judge number 1 self-damage, gets affected by multipliers. I decided to use Xerneas's buff to see if the self-damage gets affected. Normally the self-damage from 1 is 14.4%, and when you get buffed up, that number doesn't change, regardless of if you hit an opponent or not. Though, funny enough, the very small amount of percent the hammer does to the opponent does change, from 2.4% to 4.8%, but the self-damage is static. However, this made me wonder about scaling, not specifically for the self-damage thing, but for Judge in general. So I turned on fixed damage and scaling and kept using the move. Normally a 9 does over 40% to the opponent, which we can see here in the combo counter. However, when I was using Judge a ton of times and then finally got 9, it did about 21%. Despite that being the only time I got the 9 roll specifically in that sequence, it was still affected by the scaling. So the scaling effect affects every number. Anyhow, that'll wrap it up for today's video. I'd like to thank my patrons Avenkaru, Burbo, Elpidio Epic, and Aman Shareef. This one was a tad bit on the shorter side, but I'm still sort of in the midst of my finals week for college. But after this week, things are going to start really freeing up for me. So I hope you look forward to a surge of things and stuff for the near future. And once again, of course, thank you very much everyone for your continued support of this series. I really do like the concept of just blabbering on about a ton of random facts for the game. Small things that could never get a dedicated video or anything like that, but things that are cool to know regardless. Maybe you can bring it up in conversation or something. Either way, I'm glad that you all agree that things like this are pretty fun. And with that, stay casual, stay reasonable, and I'll see you later.